Part 16. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 151. On the Red Alert battlefield, what will be the consequences if the base loses power? This can be said to be either big or small. Usually in the game, the Allied forces send out spies in a mechanized manner to cut off the enemy's power, but basically do nothing. This situation can be said to have little impact on the enemy. At most, it is disgusting. But if there happens to be an attack by troops, the base that has been cut off from power will suffer a lot of losses. What's even worse is a premeditated attack by the Allies, which can cause serious damage to the enemy and cause widespread harm. But now, Wang Ling and the others were very unlucky to catch up with the latter. Wang Ling had just shouted, and before Major General Li Wiki had time to react, he suddenly heard a rapid roar in the sky. He looked up and saw that it was 4 invader fighter jets and 4 Black Hawk fighter jets rushing towards each other. Come over. This Black Hawk fighter is a proprietary fighter of one of the Allied forces. Compared with ordinary invader fighters, it has higher armor and stronger destructive power. Originally, in the face of air forces, the base's anti-aircraft guns could effectively target them, but now the base is powered off and the anti-aircraft guns are ineffective. It happens that there are no anti-aircraft tracked vehicles nearby, and only a few anti-aircraft infantry responded temporarily and fired the cannons. However, this firepower was far from enough to withstand these 8 fighters. As a result, these fighters drove straight in, rushed into the sky above the base almost without any hindrance, and dropped 8 missiles aimed at an ore refinery. Although these fighter jets were greatly weakened in the Red Alert, the quantitative change caused a qualitative change. There were 8 missiles, 4 of which were dropped by Black Hawk fighter jets. The destructive power of this moment directly destroyed the entire ore refinery was blown up. The scale of this coalition base is huge, and there are naturally more than one ore refinery. But just one of them was blown up, which can't help but make people angry. Major General Li Wiki immediately darkened his face and shouted, "What are you doing for food? Get all the tracked vehicles over here and don't let these fighters go." After listening to the order, the anti-aircraft tracked vehicles nearby immediately turned around and rushed over. The anti-aircraft infantry also stepped up their output, hoping to shoot down these fighters as soon as possible. But how fast is a fighter jet? The attack was so sudden, and the coalition forces were unable to react in time. As a result, they only managed to shoot down 2 intruder fighter planes, and then allowed the remaining fighter planes to escape the airspace of the base. If it were based on the firepower of the coalition base's anti-aircraft guns, even if these fighters could successfully blow up the ore refinery, they would not be able to escape at all and would have to be shot down. But who caused the spies who were infiltrated into the coalition base to cut off the power and make all the anti-aircraft guns useless? After all, they had received the order from Major General Li Wiki. Now these tracked vehicles were not giving up. They were about to rush out of the base and chase the fighter jets. However, Wang Ling hurriedly shouted, "Don't chase them out, you will die. Allied fighter planes only have 1 missile. After successful projection, they will of course return to the base. If the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle pursues them, they will probably chase them directly to the enemy base. What is this if not death?" Major General Li Wiki took a deep look at Wang Ling, frowned slightly, and then shouted, "Come back, set up defenses. If the current situation is a coincidence, it is too coincidental. It is clearly a premeditated attack. While the base is out of power, the Allied attack cannot consist of only 8 fighter jets, so all the troops in the base must be active to defend against subsequent attacks by the Allied forces and wait for the base's power to be restored. This base has persisted on the battlefield for such a long time and has grown stronger. Naturally, it is not a free-for-all. Major General Li Wiki did not even have time to enter the command post, so he quickly adjusted the deployment through the radio. After all, Wang Ling's request has not been agreed to yet, and now they are still called the Dog Squad. However, in this critical moment, Wang Ling and the others did not care about these details at all. In the entire base, the Eagle Squad and the Dog Squad are by far the strongest. Under the command of Major General Li Wiki, the two teams were separately dispatched to guard the entrance of a base. As for other entrances, several teams guarded them together to survive this dangerous period of power outage. Major General Li Wiki gave the order very quickly, but it took some time for the soldiers to be in place. Taking advantage of this time, after the Allied fighter planes bombed, the leading troops had also arrived on the battlefield. The fastest ones were all from the Air Force. At the front were more than a dozen rocket pilots, who majestically broke into the airspace of the base. Judging from their posture, they seemed to be heading for another ore refinery in the base. During their advance, a large number of anti-aircraft guns were out of power, but the tracked vehicles and anti-aircraft infantry were all in action and failed to respond in time. Seeing this scene, Wang Ling became anxious and temporarily ordered, "Crawler vehicles, stop them and shoot them all down." Major General Li Wiki's defense order was important, but Wang Ling was their direct leader after all. In contrast, these anti-aircraft crawlers still chose to obey Wang Ling's order. After all, Wang Ling was still responsible for the blame. Two anti-aircraft tracked vehicles quickly separated from Wang Ling's team and rushed into the base, starting to block the invading rocket pilots midway. An ungraded anti-aircraft tracked vehicle is indeed barely able to fight against so many rocket pilots on its own, but there is also a 3-star one among them, and its firepower is not ordinary. With the combination of the two, the more than 10 rocket pilots the flying soldiers couldn't hold on for long, and they were all shot down before they even reached the coalition's ore refinery. Major General Li Wiki could naturally see the scene, and he also knew that someone had taken command on the spot and changed his defenses midway, but he was not angry. Instead, he shouted, "Well done! Which anti-aircraft tracked vehicle is this?" King Xiaoping laughed at the side. Who else could it be? Who else but Wang Ling would dare to change the order on the battlefield? Wang Ling? Haha, that's interesting. Li Wiki gave a rare compliment, and then hurriedly led Xiaoping, Wang and Raoski into the command post. As for the rocket pilots in the base, it was true that all the rocket pilots were shot down, but this was only one part of the Allied attack. Following the rocket pilots, a large transport plane flew into the sky and jumped out of it. More than a dozen Allied soldiers opened their parachutes and landed inside the base. Not only that, at the same time as these paratroopers landed, another helicopter rushed over in the sky as if there was no one around. Looking at this posture, it seemed that they were heading straight for the command post. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 152. As a player of the game Red Alert, Wang Ling was used to various offensive methods on the computer when he was playing the game. All of these attacks are familiar to him now, but it's just that two Allied bases are attacking together, and multiple arms are launching at the same time, which makes it a bit confusing. However, Wang Ling did not mess up. After checking the paratroopers and helicopters, Wang Ling hurriedly gave an impromptu order: "Quick, tracked vehicle, ignore the transport plane, shoot down the helicopter first, and then deal with all the paratroopers." The helicopter itself does not have much attack power in Red Alert, but this thing can carry 5 soldiers. Based on Wang Ling's understanding of the Allied forces, most of them carry units such as engineers, Allied soldiers, and SEALs. Now that the power is out of power in the base, all the internal magnetic storm coils have failed. If the helicopter lands next to the command post, whether it is engineers or SEALs can directly take down the command post. By then, this coalition base will be in an extremely vulnerable position. The Dog Squad anti-aircraft crawler vehicle obeyed Wang Ling's orders. Originally it was still attacking the transport plane, but now it hurriedly twisted the barrel and started shooting at the helicopter. The helicopter itself has low armor and health, and the coalition command post cannot be reached in a short time. With the attacks of these two crawler vehicles along the way, it cannot advance very far at all. He was shot down on the way. Afterwards, the tracked vehicle continued to gallop in one direction for a while, and then began to fire at the paratroopers who were still landing. These paratroopers are also the exclusive offensive force of a certain force in the coalition. Relying on their powerful transportation capabilities, they can deliver these paratroopers to any location on the battlefield, making them extremely difficult to deal with. Once these paratroopers land, they will launch an indiscriminate attack on all surrounding hostile forces, which is really a headache. However, these can only be done after landing successfully. When landing in the air, they can be said to have no resistance at all. In front of the air defense force, they are simply living targets. As a result, two anti-aircraft crawler vehicles saw this opportunity and attacked them without ceremony. The artillery shells of tracked vehicles are already very lethal to infantry units, not to mention that there is a 3-star elite among them. In the end, these paratroopers failed to land successfully and were wiped out. They also built another tracked vehicle and were promoted to the level of 1-star veteran. After successfully completing the air defense mission, the two tracked vehicles hurried back to the entrance where the dog team was stationed. They were always threatened by the Allied air troops who might invade. In the command post, although the base was powered off, some basic equipment could still continue to operate. After seeing the results of the two tracked vehicles from the video, even Major General Li Wiki praised, "This Wangling, with troops they are very flexible, these two anti-aircraft crawler vehicles have saved us a lot of trouble. Isn't it? If those rocket pilots, paratroopers and helicopters are allowed to enter the base, it will definitely cause them a lot of trouble." However, Wangling's on-the-spot command mobilized the dog team's anti-aircraft crawler vehicles for defense. This can help. It's a big help to the base. On the side, Rovitsky disagreed a little. He was very flexible, but he disobeyed some orders after all. The order given to them by the superior was to guard the entrance of the base, but he moved the tracked vehicle alone to join the battle. Major General Li Wiki did not answer her, but Zhao Pingwang retorted, "Strictly speaking, he did not disobey the order. Although the commander ordered the dog team to guard the northern entrance, he did not say that he could not participate in other battles and dispatch tracked vehicles. Air defense cannot be considered disobedience. You came from the same base as him, so of course you spoke to him." Rovitsky disagreed, while Zhao Pingwang smiled and said nothing. Afterwards, Major General Li Wiki interrupted and said, "Soldiers have the duty to obey orders, but many orders are relatively general and do not specify specific details. These also require the captains of each team to come to the scene to make judgments and have the right to implement them. It's in their hands. Therefore, Wangling's actions are worthy of praise and cannot be considered a violation." Hey, yes, even Major General Li Wiki said this, and Rovitsky couldn't say anything wrong. If he continued, he would be really petty. After dealing with the Allied air forces at the northern entrance of the base, all members of the dog team are now concentrated here, ready for battle. In addition to firearms, Wangling also carried some small items, such as daggers and binoculars. Now, the base is temporarily out of power and cannot view the electronic map. Wangling can only observe with the help of a telescope. At first, there was nothing unusual near the northern entrance. Wangling observed for a while and was about to put down the telescope, but two multifunctional infantry vehicles suddenly broke into the end of the telescope sight and parked outside the base's sphere of influence. It seemed like they were gathering troops. Following the infantry vehicle, a large number of Allied soldiers also broke in not far away and gathered on the side. After counting, there were actually 50 people, including 3 engineers and 2 SEALs. Wangling didn't care much about other soldiers, but he had to be vigilant about the SEALs. This type of unit is actually the same model as Tanya, but the weapons used are not twin guns, but MP5 submachine guns. This type of unit also has the power to instantly kill ground infantry units. It can also swim and use C4 bombs to blow up ships and buildings. It also poses a considerable threat to the coalition forces. However, the corresponding weaknesses are also very obvious. The damage to tank types is almost negligible, and it cannot defend against air. Almost any offensive tank can destroy them. Now that the dog squad had Apocalypse tanks, Rhino tanks, and anti-aircraft crawlers stationed there, they were naturally no longer afraid of them. However, Wang Ling was still cautious and gave some separate orders to the two elite Rhino tanks before he felt at ease. After the Allied soldiers were assembled, Allied tanks appeared one after another within the field of view of the telescope. This time, a total of 2 multifunctional infantry vehicles, 5 Grizzly tanks, and a light prism appeared in the north of the base. Tanks, and even a phantom tank. This kind of phantom tank is also very annoying in Wang Ling's heart. When it doesn't move, it will transform into the shape of a big tree, confuse the enemy, and when the enemy gets close, it will counterattack quickly. However, this kind of tank is very lethal to infantry and tanks. It is also very obvious and can be said to be very difficult to deal with. In this attack, there were so many Allied troops at the northern entrance and exit alone. It can be seen that the difficulty of this battlefield is really not comparable to the previous one. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 153. However, although the attacking allies are powerful, the guarding dog squad is even stronger, and there are sentry guns to help. As long as those special tanks can be effectively suppressed, this blocking battle will not be too stressful. While thinking about it, it could be seen through the telescope that after the Allied troops were assembled, they finally began to attack collectively. Wang Ling twisted his neck and made a thumping sound. Then he changed his body at will, and all his clothes and equipment were changed into magnetic explosive infantry. Finally, he shouted, "Brothers, the enemy is coming. Let's fight hard, greet them politely and show the prestige of our team." Ouch! All the soldiers followed with a shout, and the morale of the entire team was instantly lifted. Soon after, the most maneuverable multi-purpose infantry vehicle among the Allied forces finally arrived first. The first ones to launch the attack were the sentry guns on both sides of the entrance. They blocked a multifunctional infantry vehicle and blocked their attack rhythm. Then they stopped and began to fire missiles to counterattack the sentry guns. But they had just fired one missile, and while the second one was still brewing, the K9 team had already opened fire. Among them, the Samsung Apocalypse tank had the strongest firepower. 4 shells came out one after another, killing one of the multi-purpose infantry vehicles almost instantly. The other one didn't suffer too. Under the bombardment of Samsung Rhino tanks and the shooting of many conscripts, it only lasted less than 1 second longer than the other one before being completely blown up. Later, the Phantom tank also came here, but it received the same treatment as the multifunction infantry vehicle. After intercepting it, it was instantly killed by Samsung Apocalypse. Wang Ling was wary of the defensive capabilities of this Phantom tank when it was in the wild or at an Allied base, but it was really not good at attacking cities and territories. After all, this thing doesn't camouflage when it moves, and its thin armor, it is difficult to resist the attack of the dog squad. After that, the group of Allied soldiers and 5 Grizzly tanks finally arrived collectively. According to Wang Ling's advance arrangements, the 2 Samsung Rhino tanks rushed out of the base, rushed in front of the group of Allied soldiers, and launched an attack on the 2 SEALs alone. The 3-star Rhino tanks are also very lethal to ordinary infantry. Under the bombardment of explosive shells, the 2 SEALs were killed before they could even last a breath. After completing the order, the 2 Rhino tanks did not hesitate to fight. They immediately turned around and returned to the base. They hid behind the sentry guns and fought with other units of the dog team. As for the Allied forces, without the two SEALs, Wang Ling lost his fear and shouted, "Brothers, hit me hard." After that, he began to control the magnetic storm device and release powerful the electromagnetic current bombards all enemies approaching here. The rest of the dog squad followed closely, spraying fire snakes one after another. Under the suppression of powerful firepower, the leading troops of the Allied forces were caught off guard. Rows of people died, and a grizzly tank was also destroyed. However, the reaction speed of these enemy forces was not slow. Soon all the infantry were deployed. They set up their machine guns and began to counterattack the sentry guns and dog squads. The grizzly tanks also concentrated their firepower and began to dismantle the sentry guns. The battle between the two sides had just begun. From the beginning, it was already at a fever pitch. Ba! 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 Among them, Wang Ling is particularly special. Among all his attacks, he is the only one who uses electromagnetic attacks. Strictly speaking, this is the first time he has personally operated an electromagnetic device since he converted into a magnetic blast infantryman. However, when switching and receiving military experience, he had long been familiar with the offensive method of the magnetic blast infantry in those memories. Now as a one-star veteran, his attack is particularly sharp, without any feeling of dexterity. Although they are only one-star veterans, the lethality of units such as magnetic blast infantry is much greater than that of conscripts. The lethality of Wang Ling, a one-star veteran, is no worse than those of three-star elite conscripts. When the two sides are fighting fiercely, Wang Ling used electromagnetic attacks to kill 4 enemy soldiers alone. Although this record may sound inconspicuous, it was a kill captured by more than 23-star elite mobilization soldiers and several elite tanks. After killing 4 Allied soldiers, Wang Ling was not satisfied. Instead, he temporarily adjusted his position and appeared behind another sentry gun, and began to bombard the grizzly tanks. The lethality of the electromagnetic attack on the grizzly tank cannot be ignored. Under Wang Ling's special attack, the bombarded grizzly tank quickly became red. Just when he was about to successfully blow up the grizzly tank, a ray of light suddenly came from the distance and hit the half-healthy sentry gun, turning it red in an instant. The remaining 3 grizzly tanks seized the opportunity and stepped up their firepower output. The sentry gun was finally successfully dismantled. But Wang Ling was not happy anymore. He glanced at the light prism tank in the distance fiercely, gritted his teeth, and ordered, "Rhinoceros tank, ignore these enemy troops, rush over, and blow up the light prism tank for me." The Rhino tank received the order and immediately carried it out. It forced its way through the entrance and exit of the base, escaped from the battle circle, found a light tank, and then fired explosive shells. Although the prism tank is terrifying, its armor and life are really fragile. During this period, it only fired a prism ray towards the stopped magnetic storm coil. Before it had time to counterattack the Rhino tank, it was destroyed. It exploded directly. Without this siege weapon, the Allied troops at the northern entrance of the base were basically no threat. Wang Ling also took the opportunity to launch an electromagnetic bombardment, quickly blasting the red-blooded grizzly tank. Wang Ling then continued to change targets, sighting another half-healthy grizzly tank and bombarding it, and combined with the firepower of other conscripts, he successfully blew it up. This explosion didn't matter, but Wang Ling was suddenly stunned. After killing several Allied soldiers and destroying 2 grizzly tanks, Wang Ling's magnetic blast infantry level was directly promoted from a 1-star veteran to a 3-star elite. At this moment, Wang Ling's mind seemed to have experienced another infusion of experience, and his body was strengthened accordingly. Even his weapons were strengthened accordingly. Yes, on the battlefield, as long as you participate in the war and gain experience, it is easy to be promoted to a 3-star elite soldier. What's more, Wang Ling is a 1-star veteran, so being promoted to 3 stars is a matter of course. This feeling, haha, feels good. After realizing this change, Wang Ling laughed happily, and then continued to pick up the magnetic storm device and launch electromagnetic attacks. Wang Ling was also shocked by this launch, because the 3-star magnetic storm device was more than a bit more powerful than the 1-star one. The range was longer, the firing frequency was higher, the power was stronger, and it even had a continuous electric attack. Under his bombardment, the only remaining Grizzly tank was quickly exploded, and even other nearby Allied soldiers were also attacked and killed by continuous electric bombardment. After seeing Wang Ling's attack, the other mobilization soldiers of the dog squad also looked sideways, and then continued to pay close attention to the output. In conjunction with the Apocalypse tanks and anti-aircraft crawlers, it didn't take long to eliminate all the invading enemy forces at the northern entrance and exit. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 154. This battle was the first battle after Wang Ling regained his fighting spirit and returned to the battlefield. He was promoted from a 1-star veteran to a 3-star elite soldier. This battle was very satisfying for Wang Ling. After statistics of the battle situation, the 2 sentry guns at the northern entrance are mainly under attack, and the Eagle squad is now in full strength. There are many 3-star elite soldiers, as well as elite Apocalypse tanks, Rhino tanks, and anti-aircraft crawlers, which have particularly strong firepower. It was so powerful that after killing all the Allied troops here, there were only 5 deaths on our side, and there were even 2 conscripts who were successfully promoted to the 3-star elite. Coupled with Wang Ling, a 3-star magnetic blast infantry, winning this battle can be said to be quite beautiful. After the battle, Sun Dehua and others glanced at each other, and then they all cheered, and a sense of joy of winning the battle flowed in their hearts. After a brief period of enjoyment, Wang Ling became nervous again. He gritted his teeth and ordered, "Crawler, take me to the northeast corner of the front quickly. All the Rhino tanks will follow. The others will stay in place, under the temporary command of Sun Dehua, until the power supply is restored to the base." After saying that, he got into an anti-aircraft tracked vehicle head-on. The tracked vehicle did not dare to stay and immediately changed direction and headed for the northeastern corner of the front. The dog squad has powerful firepower and can quickly resolve the battle with very few casualties, but other teams do not have the strength of the dog squad. In the northeast corner, Wang Ling had paid special attention when he was following the defense mission. There was the bird squad and the lizard squad stationed there. Wang Ling didn't know what the strength of the lizard squad was, but the K squad was the original 5th company, and it was filled with his brothers and comrades. They were still relatively inexperienced on the battlefield, and their strength was also somewhat lacking. Wang Ling couldn't worry about them at all. The area of the base is very large, but fortunately the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle is not slow, and it quickly reaches the front line in the northeast corner. After getting off the car, Wang Ling realized how serious the situation here was. The 2 sentry guns guarding the intersection had been completely dismantled. 3 Grizzly tanks and the remaining 20-odd Allied soldiers were fighting with the Sparrow squad and the Lizard squad. Firefights raged, with people on both sides losing their lives at all times. Although this situation was serious, Wang Ling breathed a sigh of relief after seeing it. The attack here does not seem to be as ferocious as that due north, at least there are no SEALs and light tanks. Otherwise, with these 2 types of tanks, this defense line may have been breached, and both the bird squad and the lizard squad will be wiped out. However, seeing the members of the K squad being killed one after another, Wang Ling was also furious with hatred. He gritted his steel teeth and rushed forward with the tracked vehicle. After joining the battle circle, he immediately began to release powerful electromagnetic attacks. The destructive power of the 3-star magnetic blast infantry is extraordinary. Under a continuous electric attack, 2 or 3 soldiers around the attack target will also be attacked by electromagnetic attack. After several rapid attacks, these targets will be killed instantly. The surrounding members of the bird squad and the lizard squad suddenly saw this powerful electromagnetic attack and were a little confused for a moment. When they looked back, they realized that Wang Ling was coming to help. The lizard squad showed surprised faces, but the old comrades of the sparrow squad all had their faces flushed and were extremely excited inside. "Don't be dazed, focus your fire, and kill all the enemies if you don't want to die." Wang Ling was a little angry. After shouting, he quickly aimed at a grizzly tank that was attacking the magnetic storm coil and launched a fierce attack. After hearing this, the Sparrow Squad and the Lizard Squad also calmed down and focused on the war. At this time, the Samsung anti-aircraft tracked vehicle also began to join the battle circle. Each of the briquettes fired in succession can have a strong lethality on the enemy. Under the splash damage, the enemy troops were so it's movies and movies of death. Shortly afterwards, the Rhino tanks of the Dog Squad also rushed to the front, and their powerful firepower poured into the enemy without hesitation. Cooperating with the attacks of these two squads, all the enemy on this front were quickly annihilated. After successfully holding the battle line, the faces of the members of the Bird Squad and the Lizard Squad were all filled with excitement, and some even couldn't help but cheer a few times. On the other hand, number 102, the acting captain of the K team, was relatively calm. After laughing happily for a while, he looked at Wang Ling with excitement in his eyes. 101, thank you very much. The word thank you is so jarring. Wang Ling shook his head and stopped number 102, who could only smile and scratch his head. Compared to the excitement of Team Bird and Team Lizard, Wang Ling's face didn't look good. In this blocking battle, 6 or 7 familiar faces in K Squad, the 5th company, disappeared one after another. Old comrades left one after another, which made Wang Ling feel a little uncomfortable. This is just a blocking war. There will be too many such wars in the future. Without Wang Ling's protection, none of these old comrades will be left alive, and all of them will die on the battlefield. Although he understood that this was just a game world, everything here was too real. Wang Ling simply couldn't let go of these old comrades. After the blocking battle is over, the K Squad must be merged together, Wang Ling muttered silently. It has been quite a while since the power outage in the base. Just when Wang Ling finished chanting, the countdown to the base's power outage finally ended. The power supply was restored to the entire base instantly, and the magnetic storm coil next to Wang Ling was also filled with smoke. There was a surge of current. At the same time, the base's radar also began to operate, and the electronic map returned to normal at the same time. Wang Ling noticed this and quickly checked it subconsciously. The area of the base is so large that you can't see the end at a glance. Wang Ling didn't know the current situation on other fronts before and could only check it with the help of electronic maps. The base is built on a towering mountain with cliffs on both sides. Only 4 sections can lead to the outside. Among them, the north and west are the main roads, and the northeast and northwest corners are small roads. The electronic video was enlarged to show the electronic video. With the help of the video, Wang Ling could observe that the Eagle Squadron stationed in the west had also ended the battle. However, looking at their number, it seemed that their number had dropped by 30% compared to before the war began. Even at the intersection of the 4 defensive buildings, only 1 magnetic storm coil with residual health was left. The size of the Allied forces that want to come here will not be bad. Most of them will have SEALs and light tanks mixed in. Otherwise, with the strength of the Eagle team, how could it be so miserable? As for the northwest corner, it is defended by the Tiger Squad and another base squad. They are still locked in a stalemate. The sentry guns at the intersection have all been demolished, and soldiers and tanks from both sides are still fighting fiercely. However, after the base was powered on, the situation was greatly improved. The two magnetic storm coils received power supply and began to release electromagnetic bombardment without ceremony. Every time it was fired, an Allied soldier would inevitably die. Even the Grizzly tank could not withstand the electromagnetic attack of two magnetic storm coils. The two magnetic storm coils were fired 7 or 8 times in succession, coupled with the fire support of the garrison team. After a stalemate for a period of time, this front finally ended with the complete destruction of the enemy. At this point, the Allied forces planned an attack for who knows how long, and it completely failed. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 155. All the enemy troops at the 4 intersections were wiped out, and this sudden blocking battle finally came to an end. Looking at the entire base, the price paid by the base in this blockade was not small. None of the defensive buildings at the 4 intersections were sound, and the number of soldiers lost was not small. About a quarter of the soldiers died here. In this blocking battle, the number of casualties was truly heartbreaking to see. In the command post, Major General Lewicki sighed repeatedly as he listened to Rowski's report and looked at the troops from all directions in the video. After sighing, he also burst into anger. "Allies, well done. Just wait for me, and I will make you pay the price sooner or later. We will see." As the commander of the entire base, when Major General Lewicki got angry, no one dared to touch him. After Zhao Pingwang and Lovsky glanced at each other, the latter quickly reported in a comforting manner, "Sir, this blocking battle was so sudden that many troops were not prepared and suffered heavy losses. But among them, there are also some that are eye-catching, such as the dog squad." Oh, upon hearing this, Major General Lewicki's anger finally subsided a little. He mobilized the video screen to the intersection due north of the base to observe the dog team. Although this Rovitsky used to be a member of the difficult dog squad, and even the name was his masterpiece, he did not go too far after all, and now he even boasted, "This Wang Ling is indeed capable," and the quartet troops, at the 4 intersections, their dog team suffered the fewest casualties. They were guarding the front road. The enemy's lineup was very strong and their offensive was fierce. However, only 5 mobilization soldiers died before and after them, and the defensive buildings were only lost. Just 1 sentry gun destroyed all the Allied troops. This achievement is really impressive. Upon hearing this, Major General Lewicki nodded and said, "That's right. I checked it during the battle. The performance of the dog squad was indeed beyond my expectations. It was even better than the Eagle squad. Yes, it's just that Wang Ling seems to be disobeying orders again. You ordered the dog squad to guard the northern front, but after their battle, Wang Ling took the Rhino tank tracked vehicle to support the northeastern front." As he talked, Rovitsky fell into his old habits again and became more serious in this regard. After hearing this, King Xiaoming couldn't hold it in any longer. He smiled and said, "You can't blame Wang Ling for this. When Wang Ling was in the barracks, he was a comrade with that group of people, but he performed really well and joined the battlefield in advance. That's when we separated from them." It was obvious that Wang Ling valued friendship. During the blocking battle, the battle situation on the front line where the K team was located was not optimistic. It was normal for Wang Ling to be worried about them. After all, Wang Ling and the others, you have completed your mission and successfully annihilated the enemies on the northern front, haven't you? Rovitsky was speechless and opened his mouth, but in the end he couldn't say anything. On the contrary, Major General Lewicki suddenly realized, "Let me tell you, why is this Wang Ling so courageous?" As soon as he arrived at the base, he asked to integrate the K Squadron. They are old comrades in arms and want to protect the K Squadron. As he spoke, Major General Lewicki couldn't hold back. He smiled and shook his head, okay. This guy is very capable in combat and is good at on-the-spot command. He also values friendship and cares about me. His previous originally, I wasn't going to agree to the request, but based on his performance this time, it would be outrageous to refuse to agree. Xiao Zhao. Why? I'll leave this matter to you. The dog squad will be renamed the wolf squad, the bird squad will be cancelled, and merged into the wolf squad. Okay, sir. King Xiaoping had his orders, and with a smile on his face, he left the command post and started to handle these things. After he left, Major General Li Wiki soon became sullen again, looked at the electronic map of the base, sighed, and then ordered, "Look away, you go mobilize the engineering troops and restore all the damaged buildings to their original state. The buildings are all rebuilt. Yes. Urge the barracks again to dispatch some mobilization troops. We still need to continue to replenish the troops. In addition, we will ask a few more training bases for a few more police dogs, and let them roam around the base more if nothing happens. What happened this time, it will never be allowed to happen again." Okay. After Rovitsky also left, Major General Li Wiki sighed with sadness. Looking at the 4 steel fortress-like Allied bases on the map, he also had a headache for a while. In the base, the battle had just ended. After the brief joy of victory, many soldiers fell silent again. The blocking battle was won, but with the base out of power and the magnetic storm coil losing power, the price of their victory was really not small. Many people have lost their comrades who were laughing and joking around before, and they can't help but feel a little depressed. The entire base almost has a sense of depression after the war. Looking around, there seems to be a feeling of wolf smoke, and there are potholes on the ground at the intersection. The holes and the filled smoke seem to be telling the cruelty of war. However, how many cowards were there who were transported to the battlefield and followed the base to fight to this point? In war, where has there been no sacrifice? After a period of dejection, the remaining soldiers gradually cheered up. The blocking war is over, but the war is still going on. The 4 steel bases of the Allies still stand, and they cannot admit defeat. After all, we have been fighting against the Allied forces on the battlefield for so long. Attacks naturally happen from time to time, and we have become accustomed to the repair and reconstruction work. After the interception, all the restoration and construction of the base are also proceeding in an orderly manner. Wang Ling did not return to the northern defense line immediately. He stayed in the northeastern defense area and chatted with the K Squadron, but he was always thinking about how to merge the K Squadron and what he should say to Major General Li Wiki. Will agree. However, just as he was making plans, Xiaoping Wang suddenly came over. When he saw Wang Ling here, he immediately laughed and cursed, "You bastard, the blocking battle is over, why haven't you returned to your wolf team? I made a trip to the northern defense line in vain." Wang Ling smiled bitterly, "Brother Zhao, you also know that I was transported to the battlefield too early. I haven't seen these old comrades for a long time. Of course I don't want to go back so soon." At this point, Wang Ling suddenly raised his eyebrows, "Brother Zhao, you mean the wolf team, not the dog team?" Finally reacting, Captain Xiaoping Wang shook his head with a smile and told him the news, "Yes, Major General Li Wiki has agreed to your request. The dog squad has been renamed the wolf squad, and you are the captain. The bird squad has been cancelled, and all members have been removed merged into the wolf squad, under your command. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 156. Haha, great. When Wang Ling heard this, he immediately cheered. Now he was really sleepy and worried about how to get Major General Li Wiki to agree to these requests. Unexpectedly, he had already approved it. Not only Wang Ling, but also everyone in the original K team was beaming with joy after hearing this. Not to mention how powerful the Wolf Squad is now, just because of Wang Ling himself, they are happy to join the wolf squad, side by side with their old comrades, fighting vigorously. Even if they die in battle, they have no regrets. The lizard squad also knew how powerful the wolf squad was now. After learning the news, they all looked at number 102 and others with envy, and then congratulated each other. After Wang Ling was so excited, he maintained his excitement and asked again, "Brother Zhao," from the look on General Li Wiki's face before, it seemed that he didn't intend to agree to these requests. Why has he changed his mind now? Can you tell us something? What kind words did you say? Zhao Pingwang smiled and shook his head. Although I said something, it didn't have much effect. What really made the general relent was your performance on the battlefield just now. You have made a big difference in this blocking battle. I have succeeded in annihilating all the enemies at a very small cost. If I agree to your request, consider it as an encouragement to you." "Haha, thank you, Brother Zhao," Wang Ling said with a silly smile. Afterwards, King Xiaoping took a look at the damaged defensive buildings on the northeastern front, and sighed silently, saying, "Okay, don't be complacent yet. The war is not over yet." The defensive buildings on all four sides of the base were seriously damaged and are being repaired. During this period, you cannot relax, seize the time to return to the front line, and obey the orders. Okay. After King Xiaoping left, Wang Ling left the 4 Rhino tanks and an anti-aircraft tracked vehicle alone on the northeastern front for defensive support to make up for the lack of personnel caused by number 102 and their departure. And he himself, with number 102 and others, returned to the northern front. Sun Dehu and the others had already known about the change of the dog squad's name to the wolf squad and the merger with the bird squad before Wang Ling. When they saw Wang Ling and No 102's group arriving, they first gave a military salute and then welcomed them. Before, they knew that the K squad was Wang Ling's former comrades, and Sun Dehu was helping them everywhere. Now that they were merged into one squad, they were naturally happy to see it. Although they had met before and were familiar with each other, now that they were merged together, Wang Ling, the middleman, still introduced each other symbolically. After introducing the old members of the Wolf Squad, Wang Ling turned to talk about number 102 and others of the 5th Company. However, during the introduction, Wang Ling felt a little embarrassed. Because when they were in the barracks, the 5th Company called each other by code names, and few people called each other by name directly. In addition, Wang Ling did not pay much attention to the other dimensional system and the red alert world at the beginning. Remember a few people's names. He vaguely remembered that the name of number 102 was Li Tong, and that of No 001 was Gu Suanwu. As for the others, to his shame, Wang Ling only knew their code names, but did not know their specific names. However, fortunately, these people didn't blame him for anything. After laughing and joking for a while, they simply introduced themselves. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Wang Ling firmly remembered their names and faces. After the introduction, the group of people gathered together and chatted from all over the world. Wang Ling first checked the electronic map and confirmed that there was no other movement in the 4 allied bases. Then he felt relieved and joined the crowd. With so many people gathered together, there was naturally no shortage of topics to talk about. They all talked about all kinds of anecdotes about their training in the barracks, which would cause bursts of laughter from time to time. Wang Ling originally didn't want to expose himself to scandal, but unexpectedly, number 102 Li Tong took the initiative to expose his shortcomings and revealed the fact that he had won the title of the worst in the army, which caused many members of the Wolf Squad to boo. Obviously unwilling to believe it. After all, Wang Ling's performance on the battlefield was too eye-catching and his own strength was extremely strong. It was difficult for them to associate Wang Ling with the worst in the army. But Wang Ling scratched his head in embarrassment and admitted proactively, "I really didn't make this up." "Ah. No way, Captain, are you the worst in the army?" "My dear, The captain is the worst in the whole army, so who can be considered strong? The members of the Wolf team were not very clear about Wang Ling's detailed past. It was the first time they heard such revelations. Their expressions were not to mention wonderful, and they were all a bit unbelievable. In the end, it was No 001 Gu Suanwu who came to the rescue. This title is true, but when I received this title, number 101 really touched me. We only ran 3 laps, and we already felt tired, but 101 however, the number was chased for 5 or 6 times in almost extreme condition. Even if he was really the worst in the army at that time, his perseverance is worthy of our praise and recognition. His achievements today are as good as this perseverance has nothing to do with it. When this kind of thing was mentioned again, Wang Ling could only spread his hands in embarrassment, and he couldn't say anything. Following this topic, the people continued to chat freely, and while they were chatting, someone suddenly mentioned the instructor, which instantly lowered the atmosphere of the entire team. The death of the instructor was a tragedy for both Li Tong and others, as well as Wang Ling, and they are still unforgettable to this day. After this emotion lasted for a while, Wang Ling sighed, patted Li Tong and Gu Suanwu on the shoulders, and vowed, "Don't worry, guys, I will definitely do what I said. The instructor's hatred, I will never forget it. Tanya, I will definitely kill it with my own hands. During this period, you all have to live well for me, and you must be a witness for me when the time comes. That's right, we are already members of the Wolf Squad. We are all brothers, and we will protect you to the death." Sun De Hu also hammered his heart, his tone revealing determination. After hearing this, Li Tong, Gu Suanwu and others' eyes turned slightly red. Finally, number 102 Li Tong took the lead and collectively performed a military salute. "Please, 101. Please, Captain." The 2 consecutive pleases seemed to express all the resentment in their hearts and express their memory for the instructor. All their hopes were given to Wang Ling in these 2 consecutive pleases. At the same time, their name for Wang Ling finally changed from number 101 to Captain. This is their heartfelt recognition of the Wolf Squad and their 100% trust in Wang Ling. "I dreamed last night that I accidentally broke a flower pot and asked me to pay 200 yuan. I was scared to death / laughed and cried." Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 157. At this point in the war, who doesn't have hatred in their hearts? Although Wang Ling is just a player, the realism of the Red Alert world makes it difficult for him to distinguish the real from the fake. He has also been brooding over the death of the instructor. However, looking at the 4 steel fortress-like allied bases from the electronic map, Wang Ling also felt something troublesome from the bottom of his heart. After saying Captain, Li Tong and the others were truly integrated into the Wolf team. However, after all, they were comrades in the same barracks and in the same recruit company as Wang Ling, so they did not let Wang Ling be too limited, and they did not make any effort to talk about Wang Ling's captain status. Although the title has changed, Wang Ling's image and position in their hearts have never changed, and there is also no generation gap in the subsequent conversation. During the conversation, Major General Li Weiqi's defense order was finally issued in detail. The Wolf Squad is now strong and has merged with the K Squad. They have a large number of people. Now that the camp is short of manpower after the blocking battle, they are temporarily divided into 2 teams. Sun De Hu leads a team to support the defense of the northeast battlefront. During this period, the engineers at the base were also working in shifts, seizing the time to repair all defensive buildings, and then rebuild the completely destroyed magnetic storm coils, sentry guns and/or refineries. Even for the sake of safety, this group of engineers built some sentry guns, magnetic storm coils and power plants inside the base under the order of Major General Li Weiqi. After finishing all this, it was already night in the Red Alert world. After adding these defense settings, The troops stationed in the base finally felt a little more at ease, and the base's appearance finally returned to normal after the blockade. After the wolf team was assembled, they had dinner in shifts, and then arranged for the staff to be on duty in order to be prepared for possible enemy attacks at any time. Wang Ling was among them. After he finished his patrol and changed guard with the next team, he lay down on the hard bed in the tent, closed his eyes, contacted Uncle Hay and returned to the transfer station of the different dimensional system. "Boy, you did a good job. This battle was a beautiful one." Uncle Hay seemed to be tireless. Every time Wang Ling came to the transfer station, Uncle Hay was floating here, and this time was no exception. After praising Wang Ling, Uncle Hay asked again, "How is it? Are you still used to the feeling of using magnetic blast infantry to fight?" Wang Ling nodded, recalling how powerful the magnetic blast infantry became after being promoted to the 3-star elite. Wang Ling could not help but sigh, although it is not as good as the mobilized soldiers of the 10-star Soldier King, the potential of this magnetic blast infantry is not small. I am looking forward to what will happen after I have the ability of magnetic blast infantry in reality. Uncle Hay smiled and said nothing. Shortly afterwards, Wang Ling finally heard the score report that he was accustomed to in the past. "On this day in the game, you have experienced a lot. You have accumulated a total of 18 survival points, you killed 83 soldiers of various types, 830 points, shooting down a helicopter, 30 points, annihilating 11 enemy tanks, 220 points. Add in the 1,788 points you had left before, and now you have accumulated a total of 2,886 points. You have gained so much on the first day you returned to the battlefield. The points are already quite good." Wang Ling was slightly surprised after hearing this. Before, he had only devoted himself to the world of Red Alert, but he had forgotten about points. Hearing the accumulation of points, Wang Ling had to sigh again. Sure enough, the battlefield was the best place to earn points. He had spent several months at the police dog training base and had only a few hundred survival points. But now on the first day after returning to the battlefield, I fought a blocking battle and easily obtained thousands of points. The comparison before and after is really obvious. Shall we exchange the fraction of 86 cents into cash as before? Uncle Hay asked before Wang Ling could answer anything. Wang Ling's behavior in the past few days was indeed as if he had obsessive-compulsive disorder, always erasing those loose ends. Uncle Hay had long been accustomed to this. But this time, after a psychological change, Wang Ling also changed. He smiled and shook his head and said, "Uncle Hay, I'm not short of money now. I'd better keep these points. They may not be of any use in the future small." After hearing this, Uncle Hay nodded with satisfaction. This Wang Ling finally stopped treating the interdimensional system as a pure money-making machine and really started to pay attention to it. After reporting the points, there was nothing else to do. Wang Ling greeted Uncle Hay and returned to the real world. Lying on the bed in the dormitory, looking at the time and the bright moon outside the window, Wang Ling felt a little sad for a moment. Entering the world of Red Alert this time, Wang Ling experienced a lot of things. He re-entered the battlefield, dueled with the captain of the Eagle Squadron, participated in blocking battles, followed the base deployment, etc. These processes can be described as rich, but in reality they are just a process. Just a few hours. Although he traveled back and forth between the two worlds more than once, Wang Ling would be amazed every time he thought about the time difference. This different dimensional system is really outrageous. After sighing, Wang Ling was no longer in a daze, lay down, closed his eyes and fell asleep. After experiencing so many things in the Red Alert world today, Wang Ling also felt tired. There was nothing to say all night. The next day, Wang Ling followed his usual habit and got up early to go to the school playground for morning exercises. During this morning exercise, Wang Ling seemed to be deliberately searching for his own limit, running around the track at the speed of a 100-meter race. That speed was much faster than that of a professional sprinter. There was always the sound of howling wind. Maintaining this momentum, Wang Ling ran continuously for half an hour. If it had been before, he might have been exhausted, but now he didn't feel tired at all, and he ran continuously for more than 20 minutes. Even the intermediate enhancement still retains the disadvantages of basic enhancement. After his potential was exhausted, Wang Ling's physical fitness declined almost like an avalanche. Soon he was breathing heavily, his speed dropped significantly, and his kidneys also suffered. There is a dull pain. But he still maintained this state and continued running for more than 10 minutes before stopping and lying on the playground, panting. Wang Ling was quite satisfied with today's test results. Although he didn't last much longer than before, his speed was too fast. The overall distance he ran was 3 to 4 times more than before. As for other exercises, Wang Ling no longer needs to continue. The body's recovery ability after the intermediate level of strengthening is indeed good. Within half an hour of Wang Ling lying on the playground, his physical fitness had recovered a lot. At this time, those who got up early, or those who had returned from the internet cafe all night, also appeared one after another. Wang Ling did not stay here anymore, got up, shook off his sweat, and walked leisurely. Canteen. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 158. This morning, Wang Ling's food was exactly the same as yesterday. The proprietress of the beverage shop was obviously very impressed with the student who liked to destroy, and she no longer dared to bring him a wooden cup, instead using a disposable plastic cup. I was afraid that I would be crushed by Wang Ling again. Wang Ling was also embarrassed, but after yesterday's special training, Wang Ling was now able to control his own power skillfully, and the embarrassing incident yesterday did not happen again. After returning to the dormitory after dinner, Wang Ling wiped his sweat, lay on the bed again, and fell asleep. Life on this day is still the same as usual. However, after the start of school, Wang Ling is now a sophomore, and there will inevitably be some changes in some places, such as in the classroom. Wang Ling memorized the syllabus and attended every class as before, although he could hardly follow the class. But in class, Wang Ling discovered that the number of people coming to class in their major had dropped sharply. Even Dong Fangyuking and Zhang Shenke rarely came to school and rarely stayed in the classroom. After every class, there were only 5 or 6 people there, and only 1 or 2 of them were actually listening to the class. What's more, some courses have even become a virtual reality, and even the teachers ask for leave from time to time. Relatively speaking, it is the freshmen who are more positive about attending classes. But I don't know how long they can maintain this positivity. Wang Ling was also very sad about this situation. I once heard a saying that there are 2 kinds of people in universities, one is talented and the other is scum. This statement is a bit absolute, but it does divide this group of people into 2 types. One type is a positive group of people who are aware of social pressure and try to listen to the knowledge that is useful to them in every class. For example, these students are still trying their best to listen to the class in every class, or they have little confidence in the school courses and simply enter early. Society, working part-time as students, such as Wang Ling's roommates, Zhang Shenke and Wei Bowen. The other type is the decadent people who don't care at all about the pressure they will face after graduation and enjoy and waste time in this ivory tower, such as those young people who hang out in internet cafes every day. Of course, there are exceptions for people like Dong Fangyuking who have a rich father. This guy was born with a much higher starting point than others, so he didn't have to worry about work, food, clothing, housing, and transportation. As for Wang Ling, this guy does not seem to belong to any of the above 3 types, and it is difficult to classify him. In reality, he does look decadent, but his hard work in the world of Red Alert is not inferior to anyone else. After thinking about all these things in his mind, Wang Ling couldn't help but smile. He can't control what happens to others, he just needs to take care of his own. After a day's rest, Wang Ling returned to the Red Alert world that night. During the daytime attack, the Allied forces deployed a lot of troops, but in the end they were all wiped out. The overall losses were actually higher than those of the Allied forces. Under such a blow, the Allies would not make any big moves in the next period of time. This night, Wang Ling slept peacefully. When he opened his eyes again, it was already the next morning. In order to maintain the physical fitness and mental condition of the soldiers, this base also has simple morning jogs. During the morning jogs, all participants shouted slogans hard, almost hysterically. After the morning run, the soldiers took turns to have breakfast. In the following time, the operations of the base returned to normal during the day. In yesterday's battle, the base suffered considerable losses. Although all the defense equipment had been rebuilt and even more were built, the number of soldiers could not be filled immediately. New soldiers needed to be dispatched from the barracks. This process was a bit long. During this period, since Major General Li Wiki had no other orders, Wang Ling had nothing else to do. After the routine patrol, he sat in front of the camp and subconsciously checked the electronic map. On this battlefield, Major General Li Wiki's base was not isolated. There was another coalition base 30 or 40 miles away from them on the map. From the map, this coalition base is also not weak in strength, and they did not seem to be targeted during yesterday's attack. There are sufficient troops inside and they appear to be full of vitality. Not only that, a small team was even dispatched from this base to harass the Allied hypertime mining vehicles on the battlefield. However, the combat effectiveness of this team is obviously far inferior to that of the original Eagle team. They are all infantry units, with a small number of people and poor firepower. They cannot catch the Allied mining trucks at all, and they are defeated every time. It escaped through time and space, and then continued to look for the next target. After Wang Ling saw it, he couldn't help but shook his head. This would not hurt the Allies at all. It would only be a slight harassment at best. However, in this small team, Wang Ling also saw some interesting units, such as radiation engineers. This type of unit is the exclusive unit of a certain force in the coalition. It can be called a ground infantry killer. It carries a radiation reactor on its shoulders and can emit radiation to attack the enemy. Its lethality to infantry is terrifying. The most terrifying thing about this type of unit is the impact after its deployment. All the radiation from the reactor is poured into the ground, causing a large area of land to be radiated. All ground infantry units within this range will be affected by the radiation and lose health quickly. Eventually it was radiated into a puddle of thick water. Even tank units will lose health when they are in it. Except for some special radiation-proof tanks, other units are quite troublesome for him. However, here is the funny thing. After the radiation engineers are deployed, even our own troops will be attacked. It can be said that this type of unit is difficult to cooperate with other units. Think about it, what would happen if a radiation engineer was suddenly deployed during a battle? Thinking of this, Wang Ling couldn't help but clicked his tongue and shook his head. I am afraid that the casualties of his own troops will be much more severe than those of the enemy. Wang Ling didn't want to choose such a dangerous military unit, even if he was given the opportunity to switch. Damn, is this radiation thing a joke? If you are not careful, you may be the one who is unlucky. Looking at this radiation engineer, and then thinking about dangerous units such as terrorists, crazy Ivan, and self-destructing trucks, Wang Ling snickered in his heart. The game Red Alert is really designed by Laomi's company. All these dangerous and even taboo military units are under the banner of the coalition. Is this considered a kind of blackening? However, even though it is going dark, it has not stopped the popularity of this game in China. After all, games are just games, and they are always more or less different from reality. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 159. As for these, after Wang Ling silently teased them in his heart, he didn't pay much attention to them, and then planned to continue to observe the general situation of the battlefield. But at this time, Wang Ling suddenly saw a figure slowly approaching from the corner of his eye. When he turned his head, he saw that it was Chen Tong, the captain of the Eagle team. Yesterday, Wang Ling had just beaten him. Although the two parties reconciled afterwards, it seemed that there was still no friendship. Why did Chen Tong come here at this time? Provocative. Of course, this is what he was thinking in his heart, but Wang Ling did not show it on the surface. He stood up and asked with a smile, "Isn't this brother Chen? What kind of wind brings you here?" Wang Ling didn't have any personal emotions involved in this sentence, it was just a greeting. Chen Tong didn't show any hostility at all. He also answered with a smile, "I have settled down with the Eagle squad and came here to visit. If you are not welcome, I will go back immediately." "No way, please come in and please come in." Wang Ling behaved like a waiter in a shop. Chen Tong was not polite to him. After laughing, he followed him into the tent with a nonchalant expression. As for his arrival, many people in the wolf team were a little wary. After all, their impression of Chen Tong was not very good. However, Chen Tong obviously had no intention of being serious with them. He came here just to see Wang Ling. After sitting in the tent, Wang Ling ordered 2 tea jars of cold water to be poured and he didn't prepare anything else. It was quite simple to entertain guests. Fortunately, Chen Tong didn't pick a fight. He took the teapot and put it down. He said, "Brother Wang Ling, I heard that the dog squad has been officially renamed the wolf squad, and the bird squad has also been merged into your command. Congratulations, congratulations." Wang Ling was a little uncomfortable with this opening statement, but he reached out to avoid hitting the smiling person, and Wang Ling did not lose his etiquette. After thanking him, he asked, "What, Brother Chen, are you here specifically to congratulate me?" Chen Tong shook his head. Now he has completely lost the momentum of yesterday. He even said with some shame, "It's like this. Yesterday, your 2 teams were stationed at the main intersection. The size of the incoming enemies was also very similar. But in the end, we suffered heavy casualties, but you fought a beautiful victory. Before, I thought that our 2 teams were similar in strength, and even because of my existence, the Eagle squad would be stronger than you. But in the battle yesterday, it turns out that I am a bit of a frog in the well. So Brother Wang Ling, I am here specifically to ask you for advice today." Oh. Wang Ling was also quite surprised by Chen Tong's huge change in attitude. Wang Ling relies on the fact that he is a player. He has been exposed to this game in real life for a long time and has a good understanding of the enemy's arms, so he can always respond to the enemy with cleverness. But this Chen Tong is completely from the Red Alert world. Local, he was able to bring the Eagle squad to this level, presumably because of his humbly asking for advice. Since it was not provocation or ridicule, Wang Ling naturally let go of his grudge against him, and then the 2 of them discussed various tactics in detail in the camp. During the discussion, Wang Ling listed many enemy arms, analyzed in detail the advantages and disadvantages of both the enemy and ours, and explained the principles of using arms to counteract each other. Chen Tong's eyes were constantly shining when he heard this. These narrations are of great significance to Chen Tong. With the help of the conflicting fighting style of the arms, the combat effectiveness of the Eagle squad will inevitably reach a higher level. After discussing the issue of arms, the 2 discussed the issue of tactics enthusiastically. On this issue, Wang Ling spent most of the time listening, adding from time to time and making some suggestions. Chen Tong is truly worthy of being the captain of the Eagle squadron. He has much more battlefield experience than Wang Ling, and many of his tactical arrangements make even Wang Ling's eyes shine. However, there are differences between them. Wang Ling cares more about soldiers. He is very emotional. He would rather use tanks as shields than let his soldiers be used as cannon fodder. Chen Tong, on the other hand, is very rational and pays more attention to results. He prefers tanks to soldiers. Many of his tactics use ordinary mobilization soldiers to attract firepower. Although he knew that this was just a virtual world, Wang Ling was relatively opposed to this approach. Whenever this tactic was mentioned, Wang Ling just shook his head in disapproval, and Chen Tong had nothing to do with him. After discussing these contents, Chen Tong suddenly asked, "Brother Wang Ling, although the current battlefield situation seems to be evenly matched, in fact the allies are stronger. We mainly defend and rarely organize. We must mobilize a strong force to attack. What do you think our chances of winning are if we continue to develop in this way?" This kind of question is quite sensitive, but it was not difficult for Wang Ling. He immediately answered confidently, "It's very big. It can be said that I will definitely win." "Oh? Why do you say that?" "Because I'm here, sooner or later the allies will be left with nothing to eat." Haha, brother Wang Ling, I admire this confidence. Although what Wang Ling said was from his heart, it was obvious that Chen Tong took it as a joke and didn't take it too seriously. After chatting for so long, Wang Ling finally turned to the topic at hand and asked, "Brother Chen, you should also know that these allies are also divided into many forces, and each force has its own unique arms, and the threat to us is also very huge, such as snipers. Of the 4 allied bases, 2 were exposed yesterday. The blue base has paratroopers, the yellow ones are Black Hawk fighter jets, and the orange cannon can also be seen on the map. The silhouette already represents the 3 forces. So, does the last green allied base have any representative arms or buildings? As the saying goes, knowing yourself and the enemy means you can win 100 battles." Wang Ling was also thinking about an attack plan while observing the map, but the allied forces' crack generator was really troublesome. He couldn't see inside, and it was difficult for Wang Ling to identify what kind of force it was. And the most important thing is that Wang Ling also asked Gu Suanwu and Li Tong whether Tanya, who shot and killed the 5th company, belonged to the green base. Wang Ling had to be on guard against this. Chen Tong has been on this battlefield for a long time and naturally knows more than Wang Ling. After hearing the question, he took out the electronic map and showed the appearance of the green allied base in the form of a video. After a while, he shook his head and said, "Well, I don't know. The attack on this green base was very fierce, but no iconic troops or buildings were seen from the beginning to the end. It's hard for me to judge which force they belong to." That's it? After hearing this, Wang Ling was slightly disappointed. Afterwards, the two of them had a casual conversation, and Chen Tong finally stood up and left. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 160. As for Chen Tong, there were obviously many people in the Wolf Squad who were still concerned about him. Watching Chen Tong leave, Sun Dehu and others quickly found Wang Ling. "Captain, why is he here? He didn't embarrass you, right?" Wang Ling smiled and shook his head. "No, he came here to ask me for advice." "Ah? He asked you for advice? Yesterday he fought with you arrogantly. Why did he suddenly put down that annoying attitude today? Could it be that he was defeated?" Gu Suanwu asked curiously. Wang Ling glanced at the direction Chen Tong was leaving, laughed dumbly and said, "Chen Tong is a very arrogant person, and his attitude of 'I am the best in the world' is really annoying. However, this guy really has his way. Yes, after losing the competition and knowing the gap, he immediately lowered his attitude and even came to visit me. This change is something that ordinary people can't do. This guy's future will not be bad, of course, The premise is it's about surviving as much as possible in this quagmire of war. Hearing that Wang Ling spoke so highly of Chen Tong, the rest of the wolf team couldn't help but be a little surprised. They looked at Chen Tong, who had walked away, and were speechless for a moment. After staying like this for a short time, Wang Ling began to disperse the crowd, and everyone went about their business. In the following time, the battlefield became calm for a while, and all the major bases seemed to be recharging their strength. This silent battlefield was like the eve of a storm, making people depressed and nervous. During this period, Wang Ling would check the electronic map from time to time, almost always paying attention to the trends on the battlefield. However, in these 6 large bases, there has been no movement during these days. They only dispatch a large number of mining vehicles to grab ore and accumulate sufficient funds for the development of the base. Naturally, there are also some activists who have been running around on the battlefield for several days, such as the harassment team sent by another coalition base. This team, except for some rest time, is running on the battlefield almost all the time. Whenever it encounters the Allied space-time mining vehicle, it will open fire without mercy. After several days in a row, they did manage to knock down a few overtime minecarts, but they were all run away every time. On the whole, not a single minecart was completely destroyed. However, this situation finally changed after a few days. This small team has been running around for so long and is very close to the Green Allied base. There happens to be a mine nearby. The central mining machine has sprayed out a lot of gold mines in these days. Now there is also a time travel minecar that has been beaten to low health and is mining here. After the team members arrived, they took action without hesitation. However, the time travel minecart with remaining health failed to move through time and space again and was completely destroyed. After so many days, the team finally made some achievements. It can be seen in the map video that many of them seem to have excited expressions. However, there is also a saying that extreme joy brings sorrow. They went too deep into the enemy's sphere of influence. After blowing up the minecart, they finally angered the Allies. Wang Ling could see a pattern from the map that made him gnash his teeth with hatred. The figure, Agent Tanya, raised his 2 guns and charged towards the team in a menacing manner. Agent Tanya is now at the 3-star elite level. The number of dead souls killed by her gun is no longer small. The number of coalition soldiers who died under her gun is probably incalculable. At this time, Wang Ling really wanted to send an anti-aircraft crawler vehicle to kill her directly, but the battlefield was too big and the team was too far away from them. Even the speed of the crawler vehicle was too late to respond. Wang Ling could only grit his teeth in hatred, but there was nothing he could do. And just when he was annoyed, Agent Tanya on the map had already approached the team, then raised his 2 guns and started shooting at the team without ceremony. Agent Tanya's twin guns were extremely fast, and now that she was a 3-star elite, her combat ability was even more terrifying. With a continuous shot, 5 conscripts died in almost the blink of an eye. At this time, the rest of the team also noticed Tanya's presence, but they obviously did not expect the terror of this enemy and had no idea of escape. Instead, they collectively rushed towards Tanya, wanting to fight with him. But Agent Tanya didn't care about these people. She fired rapidly with both guns, and the members of the team were killed almost in the blink of an eye. At this time, the remaining people finally realized their fear and wanted to retreat, but Tanya did not let go of their thoughts at all. When the radiation engineer saw this scene, he finally became angry and deployed immediately. The 3 conscripts beside him could hardly survive a breath before being turned into a puddle of thick water. Tanya also felt uncomfortable. She was on the edge of the radiation layer, and her blood volume was also rapidly decreasing. But Tanya's vitality was far beyond that of ordinary infantry soldiers. She braved the radiation and crawled forward a short distance. After killing the last radiation engineer with her 2 guns, she hurriedly retreated out of the radiation layer. The cost of doing so was also not small. When escaping from the radiation layer, Tanya was only seriously injured with a trace of blood left. Looking at this situation, even if she stayed out of the radiation layer for 2 more seconds, there would be no more Agent Tanya in this world. Seeing this situation from the map, Wang Ling slapped the table in front of him in annoyance. He couldn't control the force for a moment, and the whole table collapsed with a bang, startling everyone around him and starting to shout. Ask him what's wrong. Wang Ling took a few deep breaths and tried to adjust his emotions. After a while, he told others about the battle situation he saw. After hearing this, everyone else beat their chests one by one. It was just a little bit worse. Wang Ling sighed and shook his head without saying anything else. Agent Tanya's vitality is extremely strong, and she has the ability to heal herself when she is not leveled. After 3 stars, her recovery speed is naturally even more powerful. Although there is only a trace of blood left this time, it won't be long before she can appear at full strength again. On the war zone, the impact of the radiation engineers on her was not fatal at all. After calming down, Wang Ling could not help but frown as he recalled Agent Tanya's combat effectiveness. The so-called leopard can be seen through the lens. Wang Ling could see through this battle that the combat effectiveness of Agent Tanya in the Red Alert world was much stronger than he imagined, even stronger than Wang Ling now. Without the assistance of tanks, in Wang Ling's current state, if he singled out Agent Tanya, he would undoubtedly be facing death.